This is CBC Vancouver News.
I was pretty happy, kind of like vindicated in some way.
After being banned from the U.S. for life over CBD oil found in his truck, a BC man has received word the ban may be reversed. Plus,
most of the mountains of Western Canada have a very weak snowpack right now.
as temperatures rise this weekend across much of the province, so too does the risk of avalanches. And
there are people who believe that there's only one right way to be Muslim, and there's other people who believe that there are many different ways to be Muslim.
how the Muslim community is observing Ramadan this month and why it's significant. Hello, I'm Janella Hamilton. Thanks for joining us. We have new developments to share with you in a story we first brought you more than a year ago. A BC man was hit with a lifetime ban from entering the U.S. after border agents found CBD oil in his truck. But as Joel Ballard reports, customs agents recently tested the oil, and the results have given the man new energy to fight the ban.
It's been a difficult year for Jonathan Howling. Banned from the U.S. after border agents found a forgotten bottle of CBD oil in his truck.
My son plays hockey in the U.S. all the time. I wasn't able to go for the last year and a half to watch any of his games. Holiday, nothing like that. Reputational damage.
Howling runs a company that hosts Christmas light festivals in the U.S. His business had to be shelved. Then, out of the blue, he received an email from the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. They had sent the bottle off for testing. It came back as negative for THC, which means it wasn't a controlled substance. Howling is cautiously optimistic the ban will be reversed.
I don't think it's really hit me yet until I'm actually stepped foot on the other side of the border. Then maybe I'll believe it, but I don't really know who I can trust at this point.
Cannabis is legal in Canada. The same goes for Washington State, where Howling attempted to cross back in 2022. But borders are federally regulated, and under federal law, the sale, possession, or distribution of marijuana is still illegal.
As far as I know, I'm still banned.
Since cannabis was legalized in Canada, many Canadians have faced similar bans at the border. It's been big business for this Washington-based immigration lawyer, who was shocked to read Howling's letter.
Having this kind of accountability, having the government, the U.S. government actually look at one of their actions and review it, I think is very encouraging.
At the border, Saunders says Canadians aren't entitled to a process of law, with border agents serving as judge and jury. But he says this case provides some hope for Howling and other Canadians.
I think it gives him a lot of opportunity here. So now he can go back to immigration and say, I was actually not in possession of a controlled substance.
Back in Langley, Howling says he has already contacted U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Hopeful, but still frustrated.
There's so much damage that's already been done and can't be reversed. I feel more like it's just a regret that all of this happened.
Customs and Border Protection wouldn't comment on this specific case, but did say there are steps a traveler can take to appeal a ban. Joel Ballard, CBC News, Langley.
A group of construction workers in Vancouver held a rally today calling for improved safety conditions. The rally was held near the Oak Ridge redevelopment site where Yuridia Flores was killed last month. The mother of two from Mexico died after a tower crane dropped its load onto a building, which subsequently fell onto her. Her death has sparked calls for better regulations and training for tower crane operators. It was the third incident in a month involving a tower crane in Metro Vancouver that is being investigated by WorkSafe BC. BC's Labour Minister previously told CBC he will work with unions on further regulatory changes to tower crane operators. Vancouver is calling on other Metro Vancouver cities to do more to address homelessness in the region. As Chad Possum reports, it says it disproportionately shoulders the greatest share of the response in providing shelter space and supportive housing, nearly 3/4 of it.
Vancouver's call for help in responding to homelessness came as it explained how it plans to clean up the city's only legal tent encampment. Over the past 3 years, people have been living at Crab Park. 50 are still there with nowhere else to go. And as part of the frustration, Vancouver listed off all the things it does to respond to homelessness compared to other Metro Vancouver cities. Vancouver operates more than 1,200 shelter beds, but based on population and evenly distributed across the region, should really only be responsible for around 420. What it's asking is that other municipalities pick up the slack.
To ensure that vulnerable people are being taken care of wherever they are, and that they don't just have to come to Vancouver because we're the only ones providing those services. We really need it across the region.
The same goes for supportive housing in the region and wraparound services. Now, Vancouver does have the most homeless people in the region at 2,420. But has what Vancouver has built, is it drawing in the region's most vulnerable? Here in Burnaby, the city says no, its homeless come from Burnaby, and the city is heeding the call to do more. Just this year, it opened a 24-hour, 40-bed winter shelter.
Having said that, we recognize that there's still much more we can do as a city and in the region, and because we know that people are getting churned away. Because the shelters are full.
What Vancouver's demand really comes down to is more funding from Ottawa, from the province, for things like shelters, for supportive housing, and of course all types of housing. Now those requests have been frustrating for some. Maple Ridge, Delta both struck out on a $4 billion federal housing accelerator fund.
But you can't advertise a fund to Canadian cities and say, hey, if you do everything right, if you reduce red tape, if you reduce process, if you get new housing built faster, we'll be there to support you, and then not have the dollars available. Otherwise, just call it what it is. It's a big city fund. It's funds that went to Vancouver, Surrey, Toronto, Montreal.
The latest budget from the federal government drops on April 16th, and cities in Metro Vancouver say they'll be watching it for increased funding. That's so they can help with Vancouver's demand for a regional response to homelessness that's more equitable. Chad Pawson, CBC News, Burnaby.
The province says it is in planning stages with the city of Langley to build a new middle school and a secondary school expansion.
With a record number of people moving to BC in the last 2.5 years, we know that investing in more quality student spaces is essential to keep up with the growing enrollment.
The projects include a new Smith Neighborhood Middle School and an addition to RE Mountain Secondary. The minister also says the recently announced prefab classroom additions to Richard Bulpit Elementary will be ready for students this fall. A BC small claims court says low-cost carrier Flair Airlines has to shell out nearly $800 to compensate a passenger. The man had a bag full of seafood that went rotten during the 5 days his luggage was delayed. Our Leanne Young spoke with CBC's Jason Proctor about why the airline has to be forced to pay up.
Jason, what did the court find?
Okay, so this is sort of interesting. This guy, Brian Vu, travels in November 2022 from Vancouver to Ontario on Flair. Pays $72 to check a couple of pieces of luggage. Now, one of the pieces of luggage had $250 worth of crab meat, $120 worth of fish cakes, $80 worth of sea cucumbers, and $72 worth of dandelion root in it. Basically, that is the piece of luggage that goes missing for 5 days. It's ultimately delivered back to him here in Vancouver. But by that point, he says, well, this stuff is all rotten. And he decides to sue in small claims court Flair Airlines over this.
Right, so these are just some delicacies, really. Like, they sound quite delicious. I like some of those. So, but what are actually the rules for airlines when it comes to their obligations?
Well, this is super fascinating because Flair shows up, an employee, with a copy of the ticket, the contract, which says you cannot pack perishable items and you're responsible for, it if they spoil, and basically says, look, you signed this contract, that's the deal. The judge that looks at this says, well, no, actually, kind of under federal regulation, what matters more is that a Flair employee accepted this luggage, put it on the plane, and so the rules say that the airline has to be responsible for whatever they agreed to take. And in this case, it was a suitcase full of fish. So when the sort of inevitable happened, they have to pay up.
Wow, so now they are going to owe Brian Vu $700, around $700. And this is a really great tip for the rest of us if we ever have to check in our bags.
It really is. No raw meat, no vegetables. That's also come up in past cases. So just basically, you know, stick to the clothes.
Stick to the clothes. But if you do have to sue, you could have a chance of winning.
You might.
You might. Okay, all right, thanks for that. That's Jason Proctor for us.
There could be potential job action at Vancouver Airport during the busy spring break rush. YVR's food service workers voted 85% in favor of strike action if negotiations fail to reach a new deal. Their number one priority, bumping their wages up to $25 an hour, the living wage in Metro Vancouver. The workers are employed by SSP Canada Food Services. Before strike action can take place, the union will have to give 72 hours notice. It's unclear to what extent airport operations would be impacted and whether other unionized workers could cross the picket line. Travelers are being warned to plan ahead. It feels like spring is finally here. The birds are chirping and the sun is out. This weekend's warm weather is a welcome change for many looking to get outdoors. But as Saurabh Sandhu tells us, as temperatures rise across much of BC, the risk of avalanches in the backcountry also goes up.
We have some Swiss chard, spinach, kale, lettuce, broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower. These are all things that you can put outside in your garden right now.
The first glimpse of spring is already on display. And for those looking to bring some color into their homes, there's lots to choose from.
Also, here's some primula that are in bloom. This is going to give you great color at your front entrance or your front door.
Miles says it's a good time to get your garden started, with temperatures expected to rise this weekend. Beginning Friday, Environment Canada is forecasting above average temperatures for the days ahead.
We're going to see an increase in our daytime high temperatures, reaching up into the mid to upper teens for places nearest to the water, and then even into the low 20s for areas further inland, the Fraser Valley, and even up into Pemberton.
Environment Canada says some places in the province, like Metro Vancouver, the Fraser Valley and Whistler, could see the daily temperature records break.
The forecasted temperatures are anywhere from about 5 to 12 degrees above normal, so this is significant warmth coming to the province.
And the sudden change is also triggering avalanche warnings.
I think it's important that people should know it's not a time to go into avalanche terrain if you are going into the backcountry.
Avalanche Canada says a shift to warmer weather creates layers in the snowpack, and recent snow accumulation at the start of the month may not bond well with the crust layer, greatly increasing the chances of an avalanche.
Most of the mountains of Western Canada have a very weak snowpack right now. We've already been in a pattern of large avalanches occurring pretty much since the start of the month.
Last week, River Forecast Centre reported BC snowpacks to be 34% below the seasonal average. However, they say warmer temperatures ahead could lead to an early start of the snow melt, raising further concerns of an impending drought season. Saurabh Sandhu, CBC News, Vancouver.
While it's good news for most, the warm weather may negatively affect some skiers. Whistler Blackcomb says some of its Alpine areas may be closed due to safety reasons.
After a huge amount of snow over the last week, we're seeing unseasonably warm temperatures through the weekend, and we expect our Alpine terrain to remain closed.
Mercer is also advising guests to visit the Avalanche Canada website for the latest on backcountry conditions.
The weather update is brought to you by Direct Buy Furnace. To cool and clean the air in your home, call Direct Buy Furnace. Installing Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
Darius Madavi joins us now with a look at our weekend weather. But first, we're going to talk a little bit about those warming temperatures and the risks that come with it.
Yes, that's right. Even though we are all going to enjoy this weekend, at least 99% of us, we are going to see quite a lot of avalanche risk across the province continuing. We already had significant avalanche risk because we got a lot of snowpack on top of what was some melted snow back in January. But now we are compounding that with these warmer temperatures that also increase another kind of avalanche risk. So all in all, not a great weekend to be in the backcountry. So that's that 1% of people that probably aren't going to be super happy about this weekend, those who were planning to do that. But with that being said, other than the avalanche risk, I don't see any other issues here because we have warming temperatures. Those freezing levels are skyrocketing up 3,500 meters or so. That's where they're going to be sitting this weekend. So we will likely see some snow melt in this weekend. That doesn't mean this is going to be the big snow melt. Temperatures are expected to come back down at the end of next week, at least a little bit. But that being said, be on the lookout for that. But if you're just staying in the city or if you're out, just out in a not mountainous area, it's just going to be beautifully warm. Those freezing levels keeping it quite high. So you could even maybe get away with some skiing in a t-shirt if you're in the local mountains here or at some of those lower elevations. But generally speaking, that's all we're watching for, those warming temperatures. In terms of conditions, nothing but sun. Even most of these places where we are seeing a little bit of cloud in the morning should clear out by noon to early afternoon. So nothing but sunshine once we get into the afternoon. And if we zoom into Vancouver, it is again a very consistent forecast. Lots of sun over the next few days. It's not until next Wednesday we start to see maybe those temperatures coming down a little bit. In here, it looks like it won't yet, but I do think they might start to come down a little bit as we get into Wednesday, and we might see a little bit of cloud move in as well. So just a couple degrees cooler, still above seasonal, and nothing but sunshine in the forecast for now.
Spring is in the air. Thanks, Darius.
Thanks, Janella.
Muslims are observing the month of Ramadan, but does everyone do it the same way? After the break, how Muslims make the month their own. Thank you for joining our commercial-free live stream. You've likely heard of soda bread and Irish stews, but what about chicken fillet rolls and spice bags? Our Alan Regan joined Early Edition host Stephen Quinn to talk about modern takes on Irish cuisine that can be found right here in the city.
We had our in-house made garlic mayo, which is very popular here between the Irish community. The chicken is seasoned similar to a southern fried chicken breast at home. We add a hefty portion of cheese to the top of the chicken, and then that is placed under our salamander oven so it gets melted. Today we are going to add shredded lettuce, then we add some fresh tomato, and then finally some red onion. A lot of our customers like to add a portion of chips with the chicken fillet roll because it goes nice for a lunchtime dish. And it's also an Irish tradition to cut the sandwich in half because it tastes better.
Can you customize what's in there, by the way? Can you make a personal order out of it?
You can actually, yeah, but you should be warned because the debate is pretty fierce over what should and shouldn't go in a chicken fillet roll. There's a popular Facebook group called Irish and New in Vancouver. So I asked its members this week what they like to include in their rolls. Rebecca replied she likes stuffing, crispy onions, taco sauce. Adam likes mixed peppers. He likes lettuce, stuffing, and mayo. Connor got criticised in the group for his opinions on this because he likes hash browns. And Peter replied saying that that's controversial.
Okay, so that Facebook group, though, that you're talking about, they play a part in the story of the spice bag. And we're going to get to that in a moment. But what exactly is a spice bag?
Yes, this is another fast food dish, and it's sold commonly at Chinese restaurants in Ireland. It combines breaded chicken, fries, peppers, chilies, onions, and a load of salt, all fried up together. And sometimes it's served up with fried rice and with curry sauce too. And one of the places that does that is Sweet Mandarin here in Vancouver.
Our customers tell me put together. Inside have four items, salt pepper chicken, salt pepper chips, and egg fried rice and curry sauce. They say if together, all put together, make the spice bossy, this really popular.
Now, Ireland, of course, I mean, it's far away. What role does food play in that connection to home? I mean, for people like you and for the so many Irish people we have in the Lower Mainland now.
Yeah, for me, it's huge. There's what I kind of keep coming back to my own childhood, and there's a Cantonese takeaway in my hometown of Carlow, which closed down, unfortunately, during the pandemic, but we would always order their chicken curry and fried rice on Friday nights growing up. That was our, weekly tradition at home. Obviously, I feel, grateful to be here in Vancouver. I've tried out so many new things and I've broadened my horizons so much, but some days my taste buds really need that nostalgia, so it's lovely to have Irish dishes available here. And I actually asked the co-owners of the Frying Irishman about this, Athalie Jimenez, in just a moment, but first, here's Stephen O'Brien again.
The slogan for the business is cheaper than a flight, and
It is almost the end of the first week of Ramadan, a time when Muslims focus on their faith, communities, and self-growth. Our Dan Burt spoke with Rumi Ahmad, a professor of Islamic law at UBC, about why it's important.
Rumi, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Rumi, the term halal-haram ratio is sometimes used to define how Muslims navigate what is allowed and not allowed, at least according to Islamic guidelines. How does that relate to Ramadan?
Well, there's no clerical hierarchy in Islam, so everyone kind of has to figure out how to express their religiosity in ways that they feel are best, that best express themselves. And, you know, one way that people do that is through ritual. And everyone has their own kind of ratio, I suppose. There are people who fast the entire month of Ramadan, but who don't necessarily pray. There are people who are comfortable with sex outside of marriage, but don't drink. Everyone has their own kind of ratio. And one of the nice things about Ramadan is that you'll get people in the mosque who you'll never see any other time of year. There are people from all different kinds of walks of life with different relationships to their religion. And you'll see them in the mosque, you'll speak to them in the mosque, and everyone will be the same. It's kind of a special time.
It sounds like quite a diversity there. How does interpretation of Islamic law or the guidelines of prayer and fasting change as communities change?
Islamic law is changing all the time. That's part of the nature of law itself, whatever kind of law you have. When you're rooted in a community, part of the community's its history is based in the fact that it has a past, and you want to root yourself in that past and in that community. But the community has to remain relevant throughout times and places. So, you know, there might not have been any Islamic laws on tweeting or halal dating until the last few decades. But as times change, laws adapt and laws change to go with it so that you feel like you can live in the modern world, but also be rooted to this past and this community.
Now, some people, as we know, use Ramadan as the month of the year for them to prioritize their faith in a way they may not during the rest of the year. You mentioned that perhaps you would see somebody at mosque or temple that you wouldn't normally see. Is there a right or a wrong way to do this?
I mean, some people would say, yes, there's a right or a wrong way to do that, but that's part of the diversity of the Muslim community. There are people who believe that there's only one right way to be Muslim, and there's other people who believe that there are many different ways to be Muslim. Probably, just to give you an example of the diversity in the community, probably the largest theological school in terms of adherence, the Hanafi school of law, believes that there's no connection between faith and law. So doing good deeds doesn't make you a better believer. Doing bad deeds doesn't make you a worse believer. Everyone is equal in terms of belief. So it doesn't really make sense to speak of good Muslims or bad Muslims, but that's not everyone. Some people believe that that's wrong. And that's part of the nature of being in a community, is that you have all these different diverse voices.
And how do you think non-Muslims can support Muslims during Ramadan, however they're interpreting it?
You know, I tell you, when I was growing up, there weren't a lot of Muslims in my school, and I was usually the only person who was fasting. And it's hard, and you especially when people all around you are eating and enjoying themselves and drinking, but it attunes you to the fact also that not everyone is eating and drinking, and some people are going hungry. And you know, in this time, I think it's important for us to be mindful that not everyone is food secure. There are indigenous communities without clean water. And so I guess if I had to say one thing that they could do to support is to kind of make this a mindful month where we all reflect on those who maybe don't have as much as we do, and those who, you know, to make it a time of reflection and of action to make sure that everyone is food and water secure.
Rumi Ahmad is a professor of Islamic law at UBC. Thank you for sharing your time and your expertise with us.
Thank you. Take care.
Here we have a live shot of Canby Bridge where filming is taking place. A reminder, it will be closed to traffic overnight and will reopen at 6 a.m. After the break, how one Kelowna woman is honoring her cat that passed away.
It was nothing against no one. I just believe that the bridge was named for a reason. Leave it alone.
Susan Adams says she doesn't want the Confederation Bridge renamed. She felt so passionate about it. She started a Facebook group calling for the bridge name to be left alone. Within days, she had more than 600 members.
I was very upset with the renaming of the bridge, and that's basically why I had started the group. Leave the bridge alone. Basically, leave the name of the bridge alone, leave it alone. It's been the same name for 27 years, just leave it.
She's not alone. Judy Laird agrees with Adams and also joined the group.
I really don't think it should change.
It's been 2 years now since the PEI legislature voted unanimously to urge the federal government to rename the bridge Abuwick Crossing, the original Mi'kmaq name for Prince Edward Island. It's actually the name chosen by a committee back in the 1990s, but the federal government went in another direction.
The minister says in the end she had the right to pick one of the names, and she wanted something with a more national ring to it.
I thought it was an appropriate choice. I made the decision. I still think it's the right name for the bridge.
Senator Brian Francis has called on the federal government to get on with the renaming of the bridge. He also knows about the opposition to it. In a statement to CBC News, Francis says, "I respect everyone's right to express their views, but I am deeply troubled by the creation of an online page featuring a range of discriminatory and racist comments about First Nations and other Indigenous people in Canada. However, while incredibly hurtful and harmful, I know these comments do not reflect the values of the majority of Islanders and Canadians who are committed to establishing respectful relationships with the Mi'kmaq and all Indigenous people and communities." Adams says she left the group she started because some of the comments were getting out of hand. The group has since been taken down. She's now calling for a plebiscite so all Islanders can have their say. Senator Brian Francis describes the name change as a small but significant act of reconciliation. Public Works and Procurement Canada told CBC News last month that it continues to review the motion passed in the Prince Edward Island legislature, and there's no timeline for a decision. Wayne Thibodeau, CBC News, Borden Carlton.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
Join CBC Vancouver's Benit Braich at the Alumni UBC webinar, Build the Future with Gen Z, April 3rd. A panel of Gen Z UBC students and alumni will share their views and experiences about their cohort's values and aspirations, approaches to work, and more. And never miss a special programming series, event, or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter at cbc.ca/Vancouver inbox.
After 2 years and multiple attempts, a Kelowna woman has successfully cloned her beloved ragdoll cat named Bear, who died 2 years ago. A Texas-based cloning company called Viagen helped clone Bear, producing not one, but 2 kittens named Bear Bear and Honey Bear.
I just felt like there was more living that needed to be done by Bear. And these guys are his identical twin brothers, so in the only way that is possible, getting these guys to experience the life that Bear stopped having.
Stewart says she is already seeing some similarities between the new kittens and her previous pet. That is your late news for this Friday. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. For news anytime, visit our website, cbc.ca/bc. Have a great night.